Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and in today's video we're going to take a look at the upcoming class balance changes coming on the next weekly reset. So we continue to closely monitor data on class performance as well as player feedback. We've developed the following adjustments to classes that are over and underperforming in group content and PvP. These changes will go into effect with weekly maintenance in each region. Decay. So Blood Decay is getting a buff here. Bone Shield now grants armor based on 80% of strength, was 70%. So this is going to be a nice increase in Blood Decay's survivability against physical damage, particularly in Mythic Plus. This is going to be a nice reduction in the incoming damage from like big trash pulls, which can be quite scary for Blood Decay. Is also a buff to it in Raid as well, where it was already very good, largely because nothing could one-shot you really in the Raid except for if you were foolish or if you didn't press defensive when you were supposed to, or like Mythic Fire Rack, but all of that is even more survivable now, which is fine. Again, this is a hard spec to balance because it's so good in Raid already, but it is fairly fragile as the key level gets high in M+. So this is going to be, I think this is a good change. I think this is, like, armor is a good thing to target. Blood Decay's armor has been one of the weak points of the spec since patch 8.1, and I think this is probably a good way to target it. Frost Decay and Unholy Decay, actually. All damage increased by 4% for both specs, but not for PvP. Makes sense here as well. These specs were underperformers, although not by a huge amount. I don't think this is one of those cases of a spec that needs 30% only getting 4%. I think this is a case of specs that actually are reasonably close and pretty good. Unholy, I think we were already likely to see in MDI, and people already are pushing some fairly high keys on it, although a lot of that is Mirez, who can, you know, he could push on a ham sandwich if he needed to and it would work. But this is still, I think, a good set of changes here. All right, then we have Feral Druid. A lot of buffs coming to Feral. Some of these don't apply to PvP combat. Those are Rip 10%, Rake 5%, Primal Wrath 10%, Feral Frenzy 5%. And then we also have Lunar Inspiration 10% and Rampant Ferocity 25%, and those do apply to PvP as well. I have no comment on the PvP implications of any of this stuff, really. And there are also some further PvP changes in these patch notes that we're probably not even going to read in this video, because I'm not really a PvP creator or anything like that. But this is definitely a large set of buffs, again, to another spec that is already not bad. It's good in Raid, even. In M+, a little bit lackluster, a similar damage profile to stuff like Fire Mage, but lower damage numbers. Ever since it kind of got changed after Season 1 to have a lot of a lot less like hugely scaling power in AoE, both with funnel and AoE damage interactions kind of getting toned down as the target count went up. So yeah, definitely a spec. I mean, these damage value increases are definitely, this is a lot of the damage of the kit is these abilities here. So large buffs to primarily the dot damage that the spec does. Resto. So Resto is getting buffed in the mana consumption side of things. Swiftman's going to cost a little bit less mana. Grove Guardian's going to cost less. Wild Growth less. Regrowth less. And Afflow less as well. All of these are medium, small amounts of mana cost reduction, but these are going to add up. These are going to add up over the course of a dungeon or a boss fight or something like that. This is, you know, this will give you a bunch of extra casts, so I'm not sure if mana... I've played a little bit of Resto this season in Keys. I haven't done it in Raid at all. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, the mana situation, I did go but I feel like that was just because I was bad, but maybe that won't happen now. So yeah, interesting set of changes there. Serve Hunter. 4% all damage by Hunter and Hunter pets abilities. So I'm kind of surprised to not see MM getting looked at all, but I think Serve getting a little buff is nice. It's tough because BM is just, I think BM is still going to be, you know, the preeminent choice here, but Serve is really not bad. Serve and MM both not bad, fun to play, but outshone right now. And I don't think this is going to hugely change that, but definitely nice if you are a Serve Hunter enjoyer. Holy Pally, 30% damage increases in Shield of the Righteous and Consecration, both of which are a lot of your AoE, especially in bigger AoE pulls. This is a lot of your AoE damage, so that's cool. AoE damage buffs to Holy Paladin, although, yeah, wait, I was thinking of Prop Pally's abilities of these, so I actually don't know how much of their AoE damage is these effects, but I assume this would be even more of Holy Pally's AoE than Prop Pally's AoE. So, okay, Holy Pally damage buffs. I think warranted. Holy Pally historically used to be like the highest damage healer. Definitely that got a lot lower recently, but this, particularly Shield of the Righteous, is a conscious choice to be doing damage, so I think that's cool. Retribution. Retribution is getting some very large buffs to some of these abilities here. So Wake of Ashes, 20%. Truth's Wake, 28%. Blade of Justice, 20%. Seething Flames, 28%. And Final Verdict, 10% as well. So huge damage increases to some of Rhett's kit as well. Although, you know, you see bigger number here, but there are fewer abilities, right? I don't know what percent of Rhett Pally's damage is these abilities, but I would assume that a lot of it is stuff still like Judgment, which is untouched here. So still, though, I mean, these are large numbers, and this is a lot of the buttons that you do press. So yeah, interesting change here for Rhett Pally. A spec, again, that was already, I think, sleeper better than people give it credit for. Holy Priest. So Holy Priest is getting buffs here to both damage and healing. Sanctify is getting 25% healing. Heal's getting 25% healing. Flash Heal, 15%. And then we have 30% on Chastise damage, 30% on Smites damage, and 15% on Shadow Word Pain. So throughput increases to a healing spec that I think already had quite good throughput. Sanctify in particular, that's their AoE droppy heal, I believe. That, yeah, I mean, their ability to top groups and also individuals will go up by quite a bit with these changes. I'm not sure if that was the drawback of Holy compared to Disc, though. It feels like that was already somewhere where they were fine. I guess the damage increasing side of things is definitely something that is relevant for this spec, so we'll see how that shakes out in the next couple weeks. All right, Shadow Priest. Mind Blast, 10%. Devouring Plague, 10%. Shadowy Apparition, 20%. Psychic Link now causes direct damage spells to inflict 30% of their damage on all other targets affected by your Vampiric Touch, was 25%. So Psychic Link, over the course of this expansion, I believe it went 25, 15, 10, 15, 25, 30. I think it's gone through those steps. One of those might not have actually happened, but this is a number that they've continued to. They started by nerfing it as they were nerfing Shadow, and now they're buffing it back up now that they've nerfed the rest of Shadow. Yeah, I mean, this is a huge increase. Psychic Link is a lot of your AoE, so this, 25 to 30 reads like a small thing, but this is a large buff to almost all of their AoE here, I guess, besides just the Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain dot ticks themselves. So that's a lot. Shadowy Apparitions, that's a lot of damage. Devouring Plague, that's a lot of damage. Mind Blast, I mean, this is large as well. Mind Blast is going to be doing more damage and replicating more damage onto your other targets. I don't know, this seems like quite a lot for a Shadow Priest, which is good. Shadow Priest got gutted for both its sins on PTR and also its sins in the God Comp of last season's M+, but the reason that Shadow was in that God Comp, a lot of it was stuff like Master Spell and Mind Soothe, which Mind Soothe a little bit lower prio this season, still good, and Master Spell a lot less powerful now that it's on a longer CD, still good again, still a nice thing to have, but it's nowhere near like last season's Master Spell or Bust meta, so I think this is a good set of changes. This is maybe the spec that I think maybe is the biggest winner so far. Resto Shaman. All healing increased by 5%, not in PvP. Lava Burst, 20%. Flame Shock, 20%. And Lightning Bolt, 20% as well. So Resto Shaman damage is going up, and their healing is also going up. Those are the two main things that you do as a Resto Shaman, is damage and healing, so both of them being buffed is nice. Their single target's going up by a lot. This is almost all of their single target damage. It's going up by a lot. And then the throughput getting a little bit nicer as well, which, yeah, I mean, again, another big winner spec with these changes here. Arms Warrior, cleave damage increased by 10%. Dreadnought 30% and Deep Wounds 15%. All of those don't apply to PvP combat. And the 4-set bonus damage for the triggered Thunderclap has been increased to 200%, was 100%. So very large buff to the Amir Jasil 4-piece, which Arms has been in this weird spot where it's been lackluster, and it's been lackluster enough that there's been fight profiles where you look at it and you're like, ooh, Arms would maybe be cool here, right? And then it's just still underwhelming, you know, and you're never like, oh yeah, let's bring some Arms warriors, right? Like that thought hasn't really occurred. If anything, maybe your DPS warrior would try Arms for a bit or something on some fights, but yeah, I'm glad to see these changes here. I think this is a spec that definitely deserved it. And this is a large swing that they're taking at this Amir Jasil 4-piece as well. So hopefully that works out and makes the spec feel better. Prot Warrior, Vanguard is now granting extra 5% stamina, and Ignore Pain is going to absorb... Okay, when they say Ignore Pain absorption increased by 5%, previously they made Ignore Pain have the same shield size, but apply to a smaller portion of incoming damage, which basically didn't change the value of that ability. And if that's what they're changing by the absorption here, back up, right? Like it used to absorb like 50% of incoming damage, and now it absorbs 45% of incoming damage or something like that. If it goes back up to 50, like that value doesn't actually matter. It matters in some very specific situations, but you get the same HPS value whether you're absorbing 50 or 40 or 60% of incoming damage. As long as that value doesn't get much higher or much lower than that range, in the real world, it basically never matters. But if what they're changing here, which the wording makes me think is probably a little bit more likely, is they're just increasing the actual amount of damage absorbed by Ignore Pain, then that is actually a nice buff to the spec. So we'll see which of those buffs they actually mean here by it, because, you know, one of those is a fake buff and the other one is a real buff. But this is, you know, effective health per Prot Warrior, definitely nice. Reduces the chance of getting murdered. And a spec like Prot Warrior as well has several interactions based on its max HP. So increasing its max HP will increase its self-sustain as well through things like Ignore Pain, like Indomitable and stuff as well. So that is good to see there. Then we have a bunch of PvP changes here, which many of these are set bonus tuning, set bonus effectiveness, and things like that. A couple of PvP talent tweaks. And also, interestingly, they are changing the armor. They're basically buffing cloth and nerfing plate in arenas and battlegrounds, which is interesting for sure. I mean, I don't know anything about this, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but this was a line that when I read it in the patch notes, I was like, that is interesting. Anyways, those are the changes coming. There's a bunch more PvP ones, so I'll link in the description below if you want to go and read through those. A bunch of other stuff they're doing there, but on the PvE side of things, looks good. I think this is going to help M+ be even more balanced this season. This season was already looking quite good on the balance side of things, and yeah, there's certainly some specs that I'm sure if you scroll down in the comments below, you'll find players of some specs being like, I can't believe my spec wasn't on this list. You know, I can't believe they didn't buff this spec that is so clearly in need the most. But given that they didn't, you know, fix every problem with balance, I think they picked a good set of specs, and they've buffed and nerfed. Actually, these are almost all buffs as well. Very few of these. In fact, are there any nerfs among here? No, there's not, right? This is just a raw buff section, which, yeah, I mean, I think this is... I do think that their job would maybe be easier if it came with some nerfs to some of the top performing, you know, roguey type things, BM huntery type things, but a lot of those specs have already gotten nerfed a few months ago, or a month ago or so now. So given that they're not doing that, I think they picked a good set of specs to buff, and we'll see whether this actually... I mean, the season is already reasonably well balanced. It certainly could be better. There are some outliers on the tank side of things, like Vengeance, that I don't think a buff like this really does anything to add blood DK to the Vengeance Demon Hunter Prot Pally conversation, anything like that. But I do think these buffs will definitely be nice if you're playing any of these specs, and some of the specs that are buffed have been buffed by enough that I think they are added into stuff like the meta conversation, such as the Shadow Priest buffs, for instance. I think are potentially at that level, so maybe even the feral ones as well. So we'll see if that does anything there, and even if it doesn't change too much of the high-end meta, the high-end meta already has several specs in and doing reasonably well, so, it's not perfect, but it basically never is, and it's not a god comp like last season, which is the main thing that I think is really important to avoid. So even if it doesn't shake that up too much, it's going to be really good for anybody who is a main of one of these specs that has just felt left out. I'm sure there are people that will still feel left out, again, stuff like Hunter perhaps, feeling a little bit high and dry here. But I do think a good set of changes. We'll see if this ends up working out, and particularly if this goes well, then maybe this is very much the kind of thing that anytime they do class balance that includes nerfs, there's basically always 30 people in the comments going, I wish they would just only buff underperformers and not do anything else. So if this works out really well, then this would be a data point in favor of doing that sort of balancing instead of doing the nerfs and stuff, which I suspect probably would be better to include some nerfs to stuff like Vengeance Demon Hunter. But that's just my take. Let me know what you think in the comments below as well. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.